There's a question about access in nursing homes, and have you had any success or ability to affect diet in a nursing home? I mean, those facilities often are notorious for feeding pretty low quality food, I think.
I did locally until COVID hit. And before then, I had taken some patients from our hospital that had been hospitalized for serious bacterial infections that were morbidly obese. And often that would start out as somebody has bad edema in their legs, get cellulitis, and by the time they seek care, they're septic.
Yeah.
And they have to go to the nursing home to rehab. I was able to go to our nursing home, speak with the kitchen, and basically offer very low carbohydrate diet to patients, included fasting. I would swing by there on my way home and have my patients voluntarily fast in the nursing home. And we had some 100-pound weight losses with people in wheelchairs, on crutches. I mean, it was amazing what could happen, right? And then when COVID hit, I couldn't get in and out freely, and I haven't taken another patient since, from a intensive care to our rehab. But it's so amazing if you could do it, but it's all was done on my time, free time, because you can't bill for it. Yeah. But the amazing thing, that's what makes you want to come to work, when you see a guy sitting in a wheelchair lose 100 pounds and, it's like, wow, it's just amazing.
Yeah. But it puts kind of the joy back into medicine, I suppose. Doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and I experimented, so to speak, on these people because nobody would ever complain to the medical board about what I was doing with these folks, because they were happy. And, it was a very transparent environment. All the staff knew what was going on. A lot of them lost weight too. Just watch it. And, so if you take the worst of the worst, from a medical standpoint, it's kind of like, Eric Westman. I mean, he's got to do quite a bit of stuff because most docs are scared of those patients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they have a high risk for significant complication and death when you're morbidly obese and have 7 or 8 underlying conditions. I mean, a cold can kill you. I mean, it's one of those things where they are at high risk, and it's interesting. There's a nursing home down in Phoenix, Arizona. Now I'm going to talk with the owner of that. He's actually employing carnivore diets on his nursing home patients, and he's seeing what you're seeing. He's getting people that are, again, a lot of these morbidly obese people that they have to live in a nursing home, and they're getting out of their chairs and walking and losing weight, and their glucose is normalizing, and all things you'd expect to see. So it's kind of cool to see people doing this thing. Do you, as far as, well, let me go back to your range science. I know that's back in history, but I mean, when you start seeing people talking about, meat is unsustainable. We've got to transition away from that. And yet you're seeing it at the same time as a physician basically healing people. Any thoughts on that?
One of the interesting projects I worked on back in 1982, 83 was building a research grazing system, sort of testing Alan Savory's ideas. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, for me, it was like dream come true, is building all these corrals and fences and stuff. And I'll never forget putting the cattle out on a paddock, where we were concentrated the cattle by tenfold compared to usual management. And by noon of the first day, you could see, this is out in the deserts of Utah, how it had changed. They had grazed the whole stinking thing. And I kind of got the idea that with different management, how much more productive things could be. And I've actually kept up on it very closely through YouTube and all that about what's happening now with range. And just down the road from where I'm at, they graze cattle under setter pivots. And in Montana, you can get 2 cuttings of hay. With the cattle, they could have 3 cuttings using the cattle to harvest instead of the mowing it and baling it by the 4th of July, and these cattle are gaining like crazy because they graze it off at the optimum height. So it's a lot. And then it's building the organic matters. It's a long way of saying I've been on the ground where production has increased incredibly and the soil has sequestered carbon I mean, I look at the whole stinking country as being halfway fallow. You know, I mean, the potential to increase beef production. What if Iowa corn farms were pasture?
Yeah.
You know, and Joel Salatin's calculated some of this out. To me, it's just incredible how much resources we could save if we just actually ate more meat. And on the subject, if you view fat as something that never goes down the drain, you know, that animal fat is the fuel, just think how much that would save, because even a lot of meat eaters are throwing away the best part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I see that. People always ask me, are you eating all the fat on that ribeye steak? I'm like, hell yeah, I'm eating it.
Right. And they're even, a ribeye is probably lean for some people.
Yeah. Could be.
For their health.
Yeah, it could be. So I mean, this is the inevitable question, because this is the elephant in the room, is people are saying, well, saturated fat may raise your LDL cholesterol and it's going to give you heart disease, and that seems to be the biggest impediment to any of this. What are your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting one, because you know those studies, the Sydney Heart Health, and the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, those weren't published, that showed that there wasn't saturated fat's not a problem in and of itself. I think where it comes in actually as being a positive is keeping your insulin down. The studies that showed that saturated fat wasn't an issue didn't get published. And so I'll never forget reading, Gerald Reaven wrote a book, Syndrome X, I think it was called, a popular book about insulin resistance, because he knew that this was a problem, but he said it was written before those studies were popularized. How do we find a happy place between, if we call saturated fat unhealthful and we call carbohydrates a problem, how do you figure that out? And it's like, well, if the answer is saturated fat's fine, that's the end of the story. And that's the thing that bothers me, is historically there was no signal to question saturated fat. It should never have been questioned, because you couldn't see in a population people having trouble with the lack of it, the presence. Does that make?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me.
Nobody should have said that. And then it becomes a constant thing. It hangs over my head of, what are people going to think of me pushing people eating the fat on the ribeye? Because there's still such a bias.